r/nosleep. Hosted by you/jahorrible26. I work at a hotel for missing people. I met a ghost during the graveyard shift. Part 1. Now, even before my little scarlet fever problem, there have always been plenty of things about this job that make it a total pain in the ass. I mean mostly the murders, but trust me, that's not the only thing on the list, and at the top of that list, well, I mean under the whole murder thing, and that would be the night shift. Something I am somehow always stuck doing. Why is the late night shift so bad, you ask? Well, simple, all of our worst guests seem to be most active at that time. Which for me means troves of Clorox and body bags. I mean, hey, it's a 5-star hotel, man. The guest comes first no matter what it is they're ordering for room service. I've participated in more rituals and sacrifices than I'd care to admit. Yeah, apparently Lucifer is real particular when it comes what time of day a virgin needs to be sacrificed. Seriously, the amount of people that have been drowned in goat blood is more than zero, which as far as I'm concerned is enough to warrant burning this place to the ground, but that's just me. Then again, there's probably a lot of things about this place that warrant a good arson strike. However, last night's shift was something I'm still trying to comprehend, for many concerning reasons. It was about 2 a.m. when I finished up delivering my third order of tarps and corrosive acid until I had finally managed to make it back to the front desk for a few moments of rest. This rest would be short-lived, however, as near moments after sitting down and opening my book, the soft chime of the entrance door's opening rang through the lobby. With a deep sigh and a few internal insults and slurs, I placed my book back down and put on my best don't want to kill myself face on and looked up to see a man dressed in fine black Victorian England attire designed to cloak the man in a shroud of mystery. He walked with a gold cane with extravagant engraving running along the side, and whistled a soft tune that sounded like some sort of old nursery rhyme as he approached the desk. Strangest of all was his face, or rather lack of one, I should say. Now, that's not to say he was missing a face per se, but for the life of me I can't remember a single detail of any real importance. I know he had 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose and a mouth. I think he might have had a mustache too, but I can't exactly remember. I do remember very specifically his smile, however, due to how greasy it was, figuratively I mean. That kind you see on sleazeballs who knows something nobody else does. Hello, my young friend, I've been told this island of yours is a sanctuary of sorts for those who wish to stay hidden. One in which we're free to work on our practices as we please. I'd very much like to book a room. I can assure you rent will be no issue. Money is little more than an object to me, he said in an almost too stereotypical classy, old-timey English accent. I looked up and raised an eyebrow, trying to determine if he was doing some sort of bit, before shaking my head softly and putting my customer service face back on. Yeah man, no problem, and can I get a name? I asked as I readied the guest book and grabbed a pen. The scummy smile of his grew as I asked. Jack, he stated, a hint of pride in his voice as he did. I looked at him again, then the book, then back to him. Alright then, let me guess, last name Ripper? I asked sarcastically, letting out a few quick laughs as I studied the man's what I now assumed to be cosplay. Precisely. He responded, that pride in his voice raising even more. I let out a hearty laugh, before looking up to see he didn't find it as amusing as I did. Okay, so you're telling me you are the Jack the Ripper? Like, the whole uncatchable night walker killer of London Jack the Ripper? I said, slowing my laughter as I wiped a tear from my eye. Well, you look pretty good for a nearly 200-year-old psychopath, I said sarcastically, trying to break some tension, only to realize I've only built more by being a smartass. Is there something so amusing about me, boy? He asked, well, more so demanded, with a sharp hiss in his voice. Now I wasn't exactly sold on his claims, but I knew better than to fuck with the nut jobs who stay here too hard. He was now on the property, and therefore, he was now a valued customer. So with a slight bite of the tongue I swallowed down any other smartass remarks that could have possibly come to mind before clearing my throat and returning to business. No, just not every night you meet the world's most mysterious serial killer in history is all, I stated, trying to sound as formal as possible. He cracked his cane and let out a hearty laugh. Yes, my reputation precedes me. I can assure you, young man, I'm no specter or mirage of any sorts. I am indeed flesh and blood, he said with a prideful bow. I looked at him for a moment, simply just trying to process if this guy was completely fucking with me or what, but decided to continue playing on. Well, Jack, don't suppose you could help me out with some woman problems, I said with a slight chuckle before realizing how dark that joke sounded coming out, as I handed him his room key. His response was something both interesting and rather concerning. I wouldn't cross that witch with the fanciest of your modern-day artillery. I've seen Evil Boy, and contain a fair amount of it myself, But that woman is closer to a bloodthirsty succubus, he stated bluntly, and somewhat worried. Before I could ask any other questions, he quickly grabbed the keys from my hands and left, as if not wanting to speak of it any further. Seemed he made the right move, as not long after Scarlett had come for her what feels like hourly checkups. An interaction I've grown used to, well, tolerant to would probably be a better way to describe it, but well, after hearing Jack the fucking Ripper shit bricks over the passing mention of her, let's just say this visit was as unsettling as our first meeting. Well, he was dressed weird. There a cosplay event going on? She asked with a smile as she began to lean over the desk, and I have to say I'm very unnerved with how comfortable she's gotten around me, especially with the knowledge I'm now armed with. Yeah, something like that, I said, trying to remain as calm as possible. She looked at me, almost studying my face before giving another smile and walking away. I slowly sat back down into my chair and let out a sigh of relief. That's until she stopped to speak up again. You know, you're cute when you're scared, she said in tone that sent chills down my spine, before almost sarcastically wishing me a good night's sleep and leaving the lobby. Now sure, I probably wasn't as calm as normal, but I've learned to hide my fear without people seeing like a pro, and that's what worries me. I don't think my poker face failed me, because it didn't feel like she saw my fear, but more so felt it. Almost as if she could smell it off of me, and in that moment it felt like I was swimming with an open cut, and there was a shark in the water. I don't know if it's just the man's ways with words or if she really is some sort of demon, but shit, I can definitely believe it. Then again, I did also convince myself I had a conversation with a historical shadow, so maybe I've just officially snapped and dove into the deep end. Either way, I think I'm gonna head over to his room in the morning and pry a bit more. Even if he's not who claims to be, it's clear he knows something about this chick that might save me from becoming her pet or whatever it is she got brewing in that twisted skull of hers. But unfortunately, there is no rest for the wicked, and break is just about up, and I don't get paid to worry about the many threats around me. Posted by you/Jahorrible26. I work at a hotel for missing people. Our new guest is stalking me. Part 2. Well, not even 2 days and I can confirm I do in fact have a crazy stalker, and as you might guess, it's kind of hard to avoid her given my current occupation and place of residence. Made even harder by the fact that I'm required to treat all guests with hospitality. She has so far requested 5 room service orders of basically nothing, so that she may request I bring it up to speak to me, mostly just to gush over my handiwork from the other night and go on about how she's waited her whole life to find a place like this. She's tried to invite me in for a drink on my most recent delivery to her room, and I was strongly encouraged to join her for one. If this were a job I could do so, I would have quickly declined, but like I said, absolute customer satisfaction is our requirement. Basically, unless they attempt to do something physical against us, we have to fill our guests' needs to the letter, and trust me, management knows when someone upsets the clientele. I mean, it's not like they'd flay us alive or something if we refuse to fill a request or something, but the disciplinary meeting is far from enjoyable. So with that, I put on my most polite and enthused face possible, before thanking her for her gracious offer and accepting. Surprisingly enough, she didn't drug it or anything. In fact, for a brief moment it felt like I was on a regular date, and we just sat there and talked about normal things. Things like movies, music, hobbies, just an honest conversation. Which was somehow the most worrying part. She can laugh, share stories, gossip about people from around the hotel. She can be a normal girl at times, which means she can act normal if need be. She's a smart girl, that much was clear. She was patient and articulate with her words, spending a fair amount of time choosing her words carefully to come off as clear as possible. She seems to be rather calculating. However, eventually she'd always return the conversation towards more gruesome subjects. The effect bullet shrapnel has on the human throat seems to be a particular interest of hers. I just finished another order of towels and on my way back to my own room. As I fumbled with my cartoonishly full keychain, the feeling of being watched slowly creeped up on me. I quickly turned around to, rather unsurprisingly, see Scarlett had been following me. Not in any way trailing from behind while hiding behind walls and shit type of way either. She had been standing in the middle of the hallway about 4 feet behind me. She wasn't trying to hide from me, or go unnoticed. She just stood there, watching me. She didn't speak when we made eye contact, but simply smiled, but it wasn't her regular twisted smile joined by a pair of crazed eyes. It was a soft, almost sweet one, before giggling and walking off. It creeped the fuck out of me, to be honest. Not the being followed part, I was expecting that part. It was that sweet innocent smile of a happy young woman. I couldn't tell you exactly why it put me so on edge, until I finally found my room key, that is. Well, fuck. I muttered under my breath, giving myself a quick smack to the head as I looked at my room door, the room I had obliviously led my sociopathic stalker right to. I was just so burnt out from work I completely neglected the fact she could watch me after my shift was done. Alright, maybe she doesn't know it's your room, I thought to myself, but that was very unlikely considering we were on the staff room's wing of the hotel, and I had been standing in front of my door looking for the key for at least a minute. So with little more than delusional optimism, I let out a sigh and entered my room. It's been a couple of hours since, and she has finally confirmed that she did indeed know where I sleep via a letter under my door, one written in red pen that read the following. Dear Kit, I'd just like to thank you for the company tonight. I enjoyed talking with you, but I'd also like to thank you for showing me how fun this place is. I'll be honest, when we were first brought here I was bored, annoyed that I was gonna have to die chained to a wooden podium surrounded by my sad excuse of a family, but then you came along and gave us a show, along with showing me just how simple and liberating taking a life could be. You had no fear or hesitation. When it needed to be done you just went for it. So when we were offered to finish the job ourselves, I didn't want to hesitate either. After that I knew I needed to stay, even if just to see the face of the man who helped let me let go of my hesitation, and once I did, I knew we were connected. Those cold and emotionless eyes have something so entrancing about them. The look in them, so threatening yet alluring. Anyways, I just wanted to thank you again for everything. With love, Scarlett. This letter, it's had me thinking about a lot, thinking about myself a lot. It's been so long since I've been here I've almost completely forgotten how this isn't a run-of-the-mill 9-to-5 job, yet I treat it like just that. I've never thought to think of how unhinged this place has probably made me. I know I'm not as deranged as she is, or the majority of our guests for that matter, and I'm more than confused by what she meant when she said we were connected, but I can't deny she made some fair points. She was right, I don't hesitate anymore, no matter how brutal the job I'm given is. I've been working for these people for so long I've become completely desensitized to the actual work they make me do. She was right about my lack of emotion. After so long, all the guilt and disgust just died out. Now all of it is no more than a job to me. I think I need to rest for a little bit, just try and unpack all this. Hopefully by the morning I'll be able to think more clearly. Posted by you/Jahorrible26. The city followed me to the mountainside. The majority of my life was spent in the city. I was born and raised in West Philadelphia, and no, I am unfortunately not the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or Will Smith so save your jokes. Our apartment was alright, at least as far West Philly goes. We had a roof over our heads, we had heat, we had food, we even had a TV for a while, but the building wasn't exactly built for such accommodations and the flimsy TV antenna went flying after a rather large gust of wind came along. I never minded it though, like I said, born and raised. It's all I knew for the first 18 years of my life. Hell, I could list a number of things I've memorized by sound alone, specifically the traffic. Our neighbor Ted's little punch buggy with a broken horn. The owners of the pizza joint across the street pulling up in their blue van, and the most memorable, a rusty red taxi. It was so memorable due to how different it was from any other car. The way it drove sounded like chucking quarters down a drain pipe. Every other second you'd think the thing was gonna explode, not to mention the car alarm would go off. Well, I moved away from the city, yet those oh so specific sounds have followed me. And it's not like I'm still close to any city, no, on the contrary, I moved to the Poconos Mountains. By the name I'm sure you could guess, it's not exactly city-like. My closest neighbor is maybe 5 miles out, and the distance between the two is all dirt roads, yet I continue to hear broken car horns and run-down taxis driving across cracked pavement. At least it started with sounds. It started about 2 months into moving in. My new home, a small, modern-day wood cabin. It sat on top of a small mountain, somewhat deep in the woods. It was very quiet, the only constant sound being a running stream out back, making the change-up of sound even more noticeable one night after dinner. I suddenly awoke to a faint beep, followed by another, and another, then followed by an engine blowing out, followed by tires burning out. Assuming I simply left the TV on, I left my room only to be met with confusion when I stepped into the living room. Sure enough, the television was off, yet I still heard the sounds of cars, and now even the sounds of footsteps on sidewalk and incomprehensible chattering. I then decided to check the windows, and once again my confusion grew as there was nothing to be seen. Hell, I couldn't even see a single light, even in the distance. Seeing no explainable reason for any of this happening, I simply convinced myself I was dreaming, and just went back to bed. This reasoning was originally reinforced as I woke up the next morning with the sounds being gone. This armor was quickly stripped, however, as I went outside, to see tired marks run across my dirt driveway. I knew they didn't belong to my truck, as the pattern on my tires compared to the marks were completely different, and seemed to be smaller. After seeing this, my previous confusion was slowly replaced with unease, now starting to seriously question if the previous night's events were a dream as originally thought. That night I decided I'd pull an all-nighter, thinking if I went through the night without going to bed at all, I'd be able to definitively conclude if what I experienced the night before was a dream or not. I spent most of the night by the kitchen window reading, until about 2 a.m. when the sounds of the city quickly faded in. I dropped my book and stood up, bouncing from window to window trying to spot anything that could possibly be the source of the sounds. It was until checking my bedroom window for the third or fourth time until I finally got some kind of answer. Didn't put me at ease in the slightest. In fact, my confusion and unease reached an all-time high as I stared out to sea, a rusted, red taxi, the exact same rusted, red taxi that drove past my apartment every morning back home. One still functioning headlight beamed through my window, before beginning to flash as the car's alarm began blaring, and the door began to open. As I saw the driver's side door open, I came to a realization: not once have I ever seen the driver of that taxi. This would continue to ring true as the driver exited and in view stepped a tall silhouette. From what I could tell, it was a man, a rather tall one at that, I'd say at least 7 feet. Aside from that though, every other feature was incomprehensible, as if the man was made of shadows. For a moment I just stood there in pure shock, completely unable to process the sight before me, but then he began to walk forwards. His strides were long and unnatural. His legs were spread far apart, and they moved as if just learning to walk. His hands seemed to be in his pockets as he walked, before slowly pulling them out. As he did this, they immediately dropped to the ground, revealing his arms had been nearly as long as his own body. He dragged them against the ground as he walked, almost like they were paralyzed. His head looked like a perfect circle, posted on top a long, thin neck, that bobbled around with each step, and before I knew it I was face to face with this thing, and I mean literally the next thing I knew. The creature started at least 30 yards away from my window, then with a blink of an eye my window was shattered and the thing was now no farther than a foot away from me. I slowly looked up to see the face of the taxi driver, a face scarred into my memories. All I could do was study the thing in complete shock as my eyes met with the creature's, which looked like what I can only describe as palette swapped. Small, almost glowing white pupils engulfed in an inky black scleras. It lacked irises and seemed too big for their sockets, as it looked like they had been popping out from its skull. Speaking of its skull, as stated before, it was perfectly round, and getting a closer and more personal look I was able to make out its features, or rather the lack of features. It looked completely smooth, almost polished, like it was a plastic ping pong ball, one that had been painted a bright red. This greatly contrasted the rest of its body, which much more closely resembled a mummified skeleton. The thing had 0% muscle or fat, just thin bone binded together by leathery red skin, which was a much deeper crimson than its head. Lined down its spine were what looked like 4 exhaust pipes, sticking out from behind, and in the center of its chest sat what I can only call an organic car battery, as the thing looked to be made out of some flesh-like material, webbed with dark blue veins, and it pulsed and throbbed, as if it was the creature's heart. At first all I could do was stand there in shock and fear as I tried to comprehend what the ever-living shit I had been staring at, till suddenly I heard a large pop, followed by a loud crack as the monster slowly began unhinging its snake-like jaw, stretching wide open to reveal a gaping, toothless mouth. Once the creature's mouth was completely extended, it began howling out a symphony of sounds from the city. The sounds of car horns being aggressively honked, the clicking of an active crosswalk sign, jackhammers, multiple voices giving the effect of 5 different conversations happening at once. The pipes on its back began to shake, before revving up and constantly blowing black clouds out from them, and its heart battery began to rumble and buzz like a running generator. I quickly began to feel dizzy, then nauseous as the screeches of ambulance sirens and small explosive sounds of engines being blown out drilled into my head. I went to cover my ears only to meet the touch of a warm liquid. I looked back to my hand, now stained red, as my left ear began to bleed pretty badly. After a minute I collapsed to my knee, looking up to see the creature's head hunched down, leaning over me to keep face to face. My head felt like it was being bashed with a sledgehammer, and began to throw up slightly. Last thing I remember was the creature grabbing me by the shoulders before blacking out. The next morning I woke up on my bedroom floor, surrounded by glass shards, black soot marks and vomit stains buried into the rug, a small puddle of dried blood where my head rested. I shot up, hyperventilating, quickly realizing the events from the previous night really did happen. I began frisking my body to make sure I was still in one piece, before giving a few soft taps to the left side, and sure enough my eardrum was busted. I didn't spend too much time dwelling on my partial hearing loss, as I was much too concerned about if my nighttime visitor was still in my home or not. After tearing my home apart 5x over, I decided it was time to pack up and get the absolute fuck out of Dodge. Now half deaf and willingly homeless, I put the cabin back up for sale, made whatever money back I could and put it into a decent sized camper van. This van is what I call home now. I never spend more than a week in the same spot and I make sure each rest stop I take is far away than the previous one. Honestly, it's not too bad a setup. After all, it's essentially an apartment on wheels. I've also become quite the insomniac. Sleep's become a challenge when you spend every other minute watching your back, along with the sounds of bursted engines and broken horns constantly following me around.